Welcome to Module 1. In this part of the module, we will explore briefly how the Tax Administration Diagnostic Assessment Tool, TADAT, was developed and the key steps taken to ensure that it is robust. The history of TADAT. My names are Justin Zake, Unit Chief, TADAT Secretariat. It all started with a question. Would it be feasible to develop a tool for assessing the performance of our country's system of tax administration? After all, the Public Expenditure and Financial Accountability Program, also known as PIFA, had proven successful in assessing public financial management. So why not a tool to assess a system of tax administration? Like all government agencies, tax administrations and countries of all income levels face intense public demands for efficient service delivery, operational accountability, and transparency. In 2011, a feasibility study commissioned by the PIFA Secretariat compared several existing diagnostic approaches to assess the performance of tax administration systems. The study concluded that a diagnostic tool for tax administration systems was not only desirable but feasible. That it was possible to develop a tool that assesses the relative performance of tax administrations, while at the same time offering insights into reform priorities. And that the design tool should have at least 4 key features. Be straightforward and comprehensible. Be comprehensive and evidence-based. Be based on standardized data sets and a common measurement structure. And be based and scored on good practice benchmarks.
It was not like developing some basic or simplistic approaches to tax administration. We were in the process of developing a framework for diagnostic the tax administration system in a country with all the complexities that this entails. We are talking about in tax administration in the world organizations that are quite large. This organization are in charge of safeguarding very significant amount of revenues, several point of GDPs in any countries. So tax administration system is among the largest organization in a country. So that was a big challenge to realize that we had to develop a comprehensive system that also can be seen as a tool that everybody could use.
The TADAT's development process, led by the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, was initiated in early 2012. Starting with putting together a conceptual framework for a PIFA-like tool. It was also considered very important to get broad advice during the tool's development.
I think what the IMF has done very well is to go out to other stakeholders and to discuss it widely and to develop it gradually and with other stakeholders and also with developing countries. And that is how we have come to where we are today.
Capacity development partners were also sounded out, and they lent a lot of support in developing the TADAT.
There was a growing interest among donors and organizations to work on tax issues. So having this tool to assess the strengths and weaknesses in a tax administration is a great help. And also, it's also a way to communicate and to have a dialogue with the recipient institution, which is it's absolutely essential to when designing a technical assistance program.
A core TADAT Technical Advisory Group, TAG, was also formed. This group brought together experts from around the world to lend their knowledge and professional experience in the design and implementation of the tool.
We start involving regional organization of tax administrators, CIAT, IOTA, ATAP, but also specific tax administrations in order to have a development that was really taking the experience from people in the current practice of tax administration. And we also engage our colleague from the World Bank. So we created a community of experts to support the development of this tool.
From the input of the technical advisory group and other stakeholders, the core design principles of the TADAT were developed. These core design principles laid the foundation to what later would become the TADAT Field Guide. In line with the design principles, a TADAT assessment focuses on outcomes rather than inputs or processes. The TADAT methodology was designed with 3 levels in mind, using the concept of a pyramid. At the apex were 9 performance outcome areas, also referred to as POAs. And below the POAs were key performance indicators. At that time, 1 to 4 indicators for each POA. At the 3rd or lowest level was a set of measurable dimensions that made up each indicator. In other words, the 9 POAs were built up from indicators, which in turn were constructed from detailed dimensions. On the rating side of the methodology, a score ranging from A to D is given for each dimension, the lowest level, which then gives rise to a cumulative score for each indicator that the dimensions are related to. The POAs themselves are not scored. In other words, the indicators are not aggregated to form a cumulative score for the POA. Nevertheless, the POAs are interconnected logically. In February 2014, the TADAT framework was launched formally during an event hosted by the IMF. The international community and tax experts welcomed it. The TADAT Steering Committee, composed of representatives from international partners, was set to translate the vision of a tax administration assessment tool into a reality. The tasks of the Steering Committee included: 1. Delivering pilot assessments in various geographical, socio-economic, and legal environments. 2. Setting up a system of training and accrediting TADAT assessors. And 3. Testing rigorously and refining the TADAT Field Guide as appropriate. To carry out this work, a TADAT Secretariat was created within the IMF's Fiscal Affairs Department. A lot of effort went into designing a tool that has wide application and longevity. Members of the steering committee worked diligently to achieve the set outcome. Take a listen.
The TADAT instrument developed quite well. We had the field guide being prepared. We had a lot of consultations amongst ourselves in the steering committee and also in the technical advisory group.
The TADAT framework was tested thoroughly through pilot assessments around the world and in countries of all income levels. The methodology was confirmed to be robust. It became clear that TADAT was a much needed and timely tool.
This is a universal tool. Countries face challenges in revenue administration. In fact, during the crisis, for example, even very modern tax administrations faced significant challenges. Some areas could be very strong, sometimes some other area could be weak, etc. So the TADAT framework, because it's focused on the performance outcome areas we're expecting in a tax administration system, is applicable to all countries.
The TADAT was first released for global use on November 18, 2015, and it confirmed the vision of its founders. Take a listen.
TADAT comes in the right moment, and we hope that it will be, at least for the European Commission, it will be an important tool that we will use in our support to developing countries.
If we look now back at the Addis conference and see how much, and the whole BEPS process at the OECD, and how much interest increased domestic resource mobilization is getting these days, then we can be proud that we were in 2013, we had the vision to develop an instrument like TADAT, and so it's now ready to go, and The timing is just perfect, I think. It couldn't be better.
And what did the international community think about the TADAT at the time of its global rollout?
Some of you may wonder what purpose TADAT serves for the international community. Because TADAT provides an objective and standardized assessment, it allows a better identification of the relative strengths and weaknesses in a tax administration. What this does is that it facilitates a shared view among stakeholders about the health of the tax administration. So, the government authorities, international organizations, bilateral aid agencies, and technical assistance providers are all on the same page about what is working well and what is not in a given country's tax administration.
Since its November 2015 rollout, some countries that undertook reforms based on the weaknesses identified during their first TADAT assessment took a second assessment after 3 or more years. The second assessment provided the basis for evaluating the progress of reforms towards targeted objectives and in areas that were identified as weak. It also afforded an opportunity to reflect on what works and what does not work, as in the following observation.
A better understanding of what works and what does not helps focus and setting the reform agenda, establish priorities and sequencing implementation. This reinforces the design of tax administration reform initiatives. A common understanding also helps better coordination and management of external support for reforms, as well as faster and more efficient implementation. In other words, aid agencies are not wasting theirs and the recipient country's resources on things that are working well and are using the resources on things that really need to improve. This also helps donors avoid duplication and reinforce efforts that complement and bolster each other.
That brings us to the end of our brief tour of TADAT's history. Thank you very much for taking the TADAT history journey with me.